Okay. So what's tantalizing about this is observed in data. What does it mean? It means that for certain people in the middle of the population, this is going to be a tempting answer. For instance, if you recall my sample exam, are you recording? Okay, so let me just introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kenneth Regan, and this is the third meeting of the CSE712 seminar, Human Decision Making at Chess, with emphasis on connections to the theory of examinations, personnel evaluation theory, which has numerous forms that go under the names of item response theory, rash modeling, psychometrics, or classical test theory. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is, first, there is a direct connection between the situation with trying to find the best move at chess, in a chess position, and trying to find the best answer in a multiple choice exam. If you play in a chess tournament, you will face several hundred chess positions, and that's like taking a long exam with 100 or more multiple choice questions. So in the chess situation, we have real standards that are definitely known. We have large amounts of data, and chess is free of certain biases that creep into question design and possibly affect results. So it's an ideal environment in which to investigate mathematical properties that human beings are observed to follow with the force of natural law, and one of them being the nature of this logistic curve of success of finding the right move, and also of the overall error that people make. So in chess, there is an organic measure of credit that you get for playing a move, and that is judged by powerful chess programs, which now are far more capable than any human player. Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue over 20 years ago, after all, and they give judges of values which could be taken as your score on the chess exam. And indeed, my model yields a notion of intrinsic performance rating, which puts an ELO rating, measure of quality at chess, directly on your moves, whereas the real ELO rating is calculated from the results of your games, which, however, are affected by the strength of your opponents and possible luck factors such as you or your opponent blundering the queen. Okay, so there is this mathematical connection, and I'm viewing test taking through the lens of playing these moves, and these are the type of curves of expected score that arise in IRT theory. And the most tantalizing thing for me is the case of a move, or the case of a possible answer to a test question that initially looks attractive, that initially looks tempting, until you reason a little deeper. So on a practice exam that I gave at the first meeting, I had two questions tracing out values of a loop in C and C++. One, the loop was straightforward. It didn't change the loop variable. It was functionally correct, one could say, or referentially transparent, and the large majority of people got that right. But then the second loop was badly behaved. It altered the loop variable, and it was tricky to trace. And that actually made the referentially transparent answer, which was still there as an option, attractive but wrong. And there was another answer that came from miscounting the number of times you would execute the loop that was also somewhat attractive. So the point is that it might be a situation where a C++ novice might give this answer, and then the other answer, which took a little more depth, realized the loop variable changed, but maybe miscounting it would attract people up here. And then people with a lot of experience in C++, who maybe have done OS programming where you'd actually take these liberties, wouldn't be fooled by the question. So the idea that I'm trying to get at is the idea of the depth of thinking needed to distinguish a right answer and a wrong answer. Okay, so it's tantalizing to me that there are these bell-shaped curves but they also naturally change the nature of the model one is doing. So let's see, oops, that's not what I meant to put. And, oh, okay, wait a second. No, it's, oh, that's the course web page, but I thought I put something about IRT models here. No, I guess I have it on the course web page itself. Wait a second. I sent round a link on, IRT. Yes, unfortunately I can't see what this is. All right, let me take a look at the course web page. Yeah, I linked it here. Polytones, where did I put that? Oh, here we go. Here's a nice brief page. Here it is. Okay, great. All right, so this is explaining the difference between dichotomous and polytomous. And we naturally going to be in the polytomous situation. Okay, so dichotomous, nice S-curve, with this being the guessability, the difficulty being where the curve is its highest slope, and the general position of the curve left to right, I'm sorry, discrimination being where the curve is its highest slope, and general difficulty being where it's positioned along the ability scale. And polytomous, however, though, can have different questions with different kinds of curves. So here's the S-curve for the best answer, which in this case is being graphed as though you don't have any hope of getting it unless you're around the average in competence of the population. Whereas here is a question that might be attractive to someone who's a real novice, and then, but falls off to zero as people of better skill are able to discriminate it away. Tantalizingly, in the middle are all these bell curves with different centers. Okay, so understanding that mathematically, what it means for my model is the issue. So here's the thing. So the point I'm making, basic point I'm making, is that you can go in two directions from the probabilities and the expected scores. Okay, you can observe expected scores and try to come up with the probabilities, or in the other direction, the projection direction, you can project the probabilities, and that gives you an expected score. Okay, so so I'm going to start from the projection point of view. So the key idea is that if our model generates good projections, okay, so P1 hat of M1, P1 hat equals the probability in the model of M1, P2 hat equals the probability in the model of M2. Now, so there's another problem with notation. And this one, I think there's no consistency and no solution to. It's whether the hat refers to a projection or to your actual data. Okay, and you can find both uses. Sometimes the hat refers to a projection of the mean, sometimes it refers to the actual mean. I'm sending this sentence sheet around again. And unfortunately, I detected no consistency, so I'm not going to try to be consistent. Just take the hat as meaning somewhere I'm trying to distinguish between a projection given in my model and a feature of the actual population. Okay, so so the hat just means wake up that there is this distinction here. Okay, so here I have the letter L. I didn't write it right. Okay, so L equals the number of possible responses equals the number of legal moods. And we're not going to have to worry too much about the value of L. What we are going to have to worry about is the distribution of probabilities that you get. But the actual number L In chess, maybe we'll take a number like 50 or 60. Now, there are chess positions with more legal moves, but they're rare. If your king's in check and you only have 5 legal moves, well, what we'll do is we'll pretend that there are 45 legal moves, other moves, that are instantly bad. And their probability curves are just going to be 0 all the way across the board. Well, it may be just a tiny contribution for a random player. The random player might leave his or her king in check. Who knows? So that's not going to affect the expectations at all if you multiply by a lot of 0 probabilities. So just as a mathematical fact, we're not going to have to worry too much about the actual value of L. So we just have these probabilities, some number L of them, and what we know is they're also the projections and the actuals have to sum to 1. Now, if you generate good projections and each MI has a partial credit value, V of I, okay, value of move I, then the expected score is the sum from I equals 1 to L of PI times VI. Okay, or if you want to see it written out in full, it's the sum from I equals 1 to L of the probability of move MI times the value of move MI. Okay. So once you have projected probabilities for each move, you can generate a projection for the score. Okay? And you can also generate, okay, so you can also generate and P1, or sorry, E1, actually I'll call it MM, I'll use my name for it, and for MM, which is equal to the sum, I'm sorry, no, getting ahead of myself. I'm saying what happens if you have, that's what happens if you have a set of moves. So just for a move you have the expected score and P1 itself is the expectation from the best answer. Okay, so your whole value curve are the values of moves. Now, a lot of those values might be 0, you know, for really bad answers, but some might receive partial credit. So those are components of your expected score, but you can also identify P1 itself as the expectation from the best answer. Okay. Now, so this is the goal. So if you have a model that can put projections on the probabilities of each move, okay, then we can generate these other expectations. So that actually is my definition of a predictive analytic model. There are various definitions out there, but for me, a predictive analytic model is one that generates projections for the probabilities of numerous events. Okay. Now, so I'm going to go into the presentation that I linked, which will be up here. But before I do so, I want to reference one thing that was in the background reading from my reading Computer Science versus Chess. So I should ask, by the way, do any of you have questions about that reading? I'm going to be referring to it a few times, you know, over the next weeks. And so the first significance about it is that chess is a game of complete information, but the information about the best move is completely hidden. It's hidden. Okay, so chess is complex. Okay, it's a concrete game, but the general type of problem, playing a chess-like game, is more than NP hard. It is a problem of very high complexity. So what skill at chess consists of, it consists of your skill at recognizing the best move or good moves in a situation, however, where there are grounds for uncertainty. Sometimes what looks like the best move is actually a trap, and maybe it looks like the best move for you up to here, but the trap itself can be recognized. So the generic term for this is, in chess, as in course taking, even though we have perfect information, and ideally you would have perfect information in your course. Like when you're looking at a block of C++ code, you are given perfect information. But we humans are subject to what's called bounded rationality. And some of my colleagues, most notably Noam Nassan and Lance Fortnow, gone from complexity theory into bounded rationality, where mistakes happen because situations are complex, and we all have human limited skill at being able to cope with them. And you could say that's equally true with situations about trading stocks. But trading stocks are subject to a certain other kind of uncertainty because we don't have complete information. Nevertheless, what's being graded is our ability or aptitude to sort of sniff out the best options with stock trades here, to sniff out the best chess moves in a position when maybe we don't certainly know, and on courses to sniff out the best answer when at least the grader of the exam does certainly know. Okay, so that's the so it's a situation of bounded rationality. Chess is complex. So it's a matter of how well we cope on this actual exam. So therefore we're trying to, I don't want that. So what we're trying to do is predict responses. Okay, so now in the last 10 or so minutes, probably 10 under, just give some slides from this presentation that I gave a year ago to the meeting of the World Chess Federation. Okay, so even more generally than chess positions or moves in a chess position, we can have any events. We can be an insurance company and we are trying to judge the probabilities of events, of certain accidents or damages happening. Okay, so a predictive model says given a list of potential events and data from them, you want to estimate the probabilities for them to occur. Okay, here I'm talking about the real probabilities, not talking about my projections, which have the hats. Okay, so so E1L could be courses for that a disease could take. Notice I included the question, the exam question thing, but legal moves in a chess position. Okay, and according to, if you're an insurance company, every event might come with a cost. So suppose each event has a cost CI, then C hat, the sum over I, is the projected total cost. Now, here I phrased it in terms of cost, but that's really the flip side of value. You could say that's just putting a minus sign on the value. And since this kind of sum is a linear equation, the minus sign just factors through. And there's going to be no essential difference between whether you regard the return as cost or reward. You could just as well say, well, the person paid $5,000 for the insurance policy, so if the cost is $3,000, then my reward is $2,000. And it's actually the same thing with the chess moves. The chess moves have values, but what I actually take is the difference from the optimal move, the value of the optimal move, as a cost measure. Okay, so here are my hats for the projections. And we might want to project the probability of playing a move that's within an interval. In other words, here, for an insurance company, how close is your estimate of damages to the actual cost that you incur over thousands of policies. Okay, So here, this delta is the cost of an inferior move. Now, I could have taken delta to be simply the value, difference in value, V1 minus VI, but you know from Wednesday I showed the result of scaling the values. So I actually have a relative to the overall value measure, delta, which I haven't mathematically specified yet. But so delta is just a difference function, okay? And then so the projected error, so if AI is this difference in value, then I'm actually getting the projected error. So it's again, it's a linear function. So if I change this and make this V1 minus VI, and make this value of M1 minus value, okay, I've altered the sign of the quantity, but I haven't really changed the nature of the model too much. Okay. All right, so now multiple trials. So capital T in this case is going to be the number of trials or the number of chess positions in a series of games. So now, okay, so now for each event, you can project the number of times that event happens. How many times does a home in a given subdivision get damaged by fire? Okay. And you might want to project an interval of the incidence of damage by fire. Okay. And this also comes along with the attitude that if you're doing an insurance company, you want to estimate not only want to estimate the natural occurrence of fire, but you want to estimate the frequency with which the actual occurrences of fire may deviate from your projections. And a deviation might happen for a non-model reason, for an external reason, such as lots of drought and much more risk of fire that were not necessarily within the confines of your projections. So knowing the deviation helps you know how much reserve to keep in case of disaster, reserve money in case you're paying out more claims than you expected to. So important for me to know the deviations in my projections because those are ultimately how I judge unlikelihoods in the cheating cases. So the skeptical way to put it is that predictive models need to project how often they are wrong. Okay, so to be able to distinguish cases of the model being wrong from cases of the player being wrong because he or she was cheating with the computer. Okay, so now this leads to the idea of a confidence test. So let's say we have these legal moves at turn T, and we have the E1 is the event that the player plays the move that the chess program wants you to play. Okay, so now K hat is the expected agreement over T turns. So now over here, what I started to write, but I was getting a little ahead of things. I called it K hat for the to be abstract. Since I'm talking about chess moves here, let me just call it MM hat. Move match hat is the sum from T equals 1 to the number of turns. And now I'm going to put an extra little subscript because now I mean the values of all of these moves at turn T. Okay. And what I said about the number of legal moves is me just giving me the excuse not to put a subscript T for the turn on L itself because that would be really messy. So, okay, so MM is a sum from that of P1 comma T. Okay, with a 1 over T in front, capital T in front, to make it a percentage. So that's the projection for the frequency with which players will play the first move as judged by the computer. Okay, and here, if I put if I give this a name, and I'll call it, unfortunately, both error and average error. Well, let me put it just as it is by itself. Okay, so the expected error So then the average error, okay, is going to be 1 over t, the sum from t equals 1 to t, put a hat on this, of e at turn t. This being this expected difference in value. So those are the projections for the number of agreements with the chess computer with a certain program by a player of a given rating, and also on cases where the player plays a move judged inferior by the computer program, what is the difference in value? So those are my two main cheating tests. And what I need to do here is not only project the expected percentage agreement, there's the expected score on the chess exam with dichotomous credit, first best move only, for a player of a given rating, I need to put a confidence interval on that. And I'll be talking more about that next week. And similarly, for the average error measure, the error per move, I have the expected score on chess viewed as a partial credit exam, polytomous credit, and I need to put a confidence interval on that, that being my other main cheating test. Okay, so let me just, so now I got a little, so multiple trials. So here what I talked about, I'm not concerned you, is the fact that to validate the training on non-cheating players, I run multiple trials on random sets of data. So this shows that is used to test that my confidence intervals themselves match the population. So this is my own training to set the standards for my own test. Okay, so I talked about how I ran these suites of trials for each ELO level, 1600 through 2700, and I have data even going to 1000, but not quite enough of it yet, as you'll see. So next week I will throw open and give you a tour of the data that's on the machine Metallica, and you'll notice that below 1600 the data gets really thin because there simply aren't so many recorded games by chess players of the lowest level. Okay, so all right, so then so this is what I'm going to get into next week. So I'm going to stop here, and these are the idea of standard deviations and intervals around projections, namely the so-called sigma. Okay, so I'm going to give you a reading on that as well. But this sort of basic statistics of projected means and projected standard deviations and how they correspond to actual standard deviations, that's what's coming up Wednesday. Okay, any questions? All right, so I will stop a little early, but I guess the person who left, was that the person who has the course on the Main Street campus?
Actually, I was the one.
Oh, you were the one. Okay, so what's happened?
But I dropped that course. I was not sure if I'll be able to make in time, so I dropped it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I was trying to accommodate you.
No, but that's fine. Like now, the issue is solved.
Okay, so what that sets up, we can spring back to the possibility of having Wednesday not be quite so long and having this be a normal length. So would people prefer that? Yes? Okay, so, all right, so that might help because also I notice, when it's a short day like today, the effect of coming 10 minutes late really matters more. Plus, I had some hiccups even. I wasted a couple of minutes setting up after coming from something else. Okay, so, yeah, okay, so, well, thanks very much. Okay, so I will see if I can book a more relaxed times, and that's why I'll aim to finish at 12:15 or 12:20 on Wednesdays. Give all of us more time for lunch, I guess. I wound up just getting my sandwich at 5 minutes to 1. Being a little late.